Jo Calvino, Jake Doran and Jascha Coetzer here. Welcome to the Athlete's Confession show here on the Global Sports Channel. It's all wonderful to have you with us today. How are you all? Let's start off with you, Jo, over there in sunny, beautiful UK today.
I'm good, thank you. I'm looking forward to this session this morning, so it's a nice start to my day.
Brilliant. What about you, Jake? Whereabouts are you today?
I'm currently sitting in the dorms of the Australian Institute of Sport down in Canberra. It's my night time compared to Jo, but I'm well and I'm excited to get into it.
Brilliant. And I guess we're seeing how elite athletes really live in Australia, yeah, with the beautiful concrete walls of the Australian Institute of Sport.
Yeah, look, in my honest opinion, it's a bit of a hole. Could use a bit of a spruce up one of these days if they don't decommission it, but yeah, we're here at the moment, so we're making the best of it.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Jascha, where are you speaking to us tonight?
I'm sitting in the lovely world of Townsville in far north Queensland. Actually, it's lovely weather tonight. I got the aircon on, so yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
Fantastic. Well, let's get started now that you're all on board. And just to let you know, we're actually going out to over 102 countries around the world with this show, so you've got a fairly multicultural audience that's listening in today. So I thought what we'd do is start off by getting you to talk about what sport you're actually into and how you started off that journey of getting into that particular sport. So let's go ladies first again. Jo, what are you? How did you get into your sport and what is your sport?
Okay, so my sport is Olympic weightlifting. My journey started first as a platform and springboard diver, which I know in Australia is a pretty big sport. And I was doing my strength and conditioning training for my diving when the guy that Keith Morgan, who was our strength and conditioning coach, was actually a weightlifting coach. So I was on the cusp at 13 years of age, where I was thinking about giving up the sport because I felt like I'd gone as far as I was going to go in the sport at that time. And he kind of presented an opportunity to me and one day just asked how my training was going. I said, yeah, it's good, but I think I'm going to call it quits after senior nationals this year, like at the start of the year going into 1994. And he saw that as the opportunity to see if I would be interested in a sport that, wasn't an Olympic sport or a Commonwealth sport at that point for women, but had said to me, do you want to come and give weightlifting a try? Because I think you could be quite good. So I was an avid sports participant. I'd give everything and anything a go. We were always encouraged by my parents to be quite active and probably just to burn up energy, to be honest. And so I said, he basically said to me, I think you could be quite good. And I asked a question and went, well, how good do you think? And he was like, I think you could be I could make you an international athlete. And I was kind of enticed by that. And I thought, this is quite interesting. And he just said to me, he said, if you come and give it a go and you try it, if you don't like it, you can say you've tried it. But if you just don't try at all, it's an opportunity missed. And I was one of those kids that I didn't like missing out on opportunities. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come along. So it was the first sport ever that I actually asked my older brother. Usually I followed him into sports, but this time around I was like, will you come to this gym with me? And, middle of early 90s, it wasn't a big female sport. There was no females in this gym I went into. They were all mainly like weightlifters and powerlifters and guys or athletes doing strength sports. So yeah, it was quite an insight, but I actually felt really comfortable and at ease, and that's where it started. And 27 years down the line, I'm hook, line and sinker in the sport in all ways you can imagine. So yeah, that's kind of a nutshell, but I'm still passionate about diving. I work and built a career alongside in my first sport that I loved, alongside my now sport, as it were.
Yeah, fantastic. How old were you when you started diving?
I was 5 years old when I started diving.
Right.
So a long time in sport, but wouldn't change anything. Absolutely loved it. And diving is like my first family. So two of the coaches now based in Australia for diving are actually British coaches. So there's now this association. of British coaches, and our performance director when I started a career in diving was actually an Australian. So my first ever diving coach is the performance manager for British diving. So I've still got a lot of connections to the sport, and that's why I think I love it, because sport's just an amazing family as one.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, you're the first athlete I've ever met who's gone from diving to weightlifting as a sport. That's quite a transition.
Really, it's actually turning out to be more common. I actually stole one of my divers and made her a weightlifter. But there's,
right.
there's a few, there's a lot of similarities, I guess, from like a sports transfer. But yeah, there's a few American girls that are now weightlifting that were divers first. There's been a couple, so it's becoming, it's becoming a bit more of a popular thing. But yeah, it's all good. I mean, they're great sports, so yeah, it's quite an interesting one. From water to weights, so yeah. Much drier in weightlifting.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody diving off a springboard yet with a couple of hand weights in their hands. That's probably still to come, that evolution of diving, right? Maybe you could start that as a trend, yeah?
Yeah, maybe I'll create a new sports of weightlifting diving or something,
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's great to hear how you got into that. Now, Jascha, what about you? What was your sport that you're currently doing, and how did you get into it?
For me, my sport that I currently do, I'm a 110-meter hurdler, so I do athletics. And I actually got into athletics when I was about 3 years old in kindy, going on 4. Mum was the PE teacher at the high school next door, and she used to pack out little hurdles. And since then, I've been hurdling, so since my whole life, basically. But I took a turn away from athletics for a bit, and I played soccer from around under 9s till under 16s, and got quite good at soccer. I played high-level soccer, and until I broke my leg, unfortunately, doing soccer. And while I was doing my rehab and stuff, I said to my parents, "Look, I might give athletics another shot again." I still do it during the summer every now and then. It was a good vibe. I had some friends who still did it. So around year 11, I was like, "Oh, I'll go back to athletics," and that was 4 years ago. So that was in Melbourne. And then 2 years ago, I moved to Townsville. I met Paul, and I now train with Jake. And yeah, it's just picked up from there, really. So I'm really into the athletics world at the moment. I feel like I've just started, really, my career in athletics. So yeah, that's how I got into athletics, really. It's been part of my life forever. So yeah, that's really how I am an athlete and always have been, really.
The obvious question is, why did you start so late at the age of 3?
I think because I skipped walking, so I wasn't able to join the walks yet. So I had to wait till I could run, So I went straight from the crawl to the run. So my family's heavily in sport. Dad played high level rugby in South Africa, and Mum was a netball player. They all played in the South African teams and stuff. So yeah, so it's been a journey, and my whole family, extended family. So we're a very sports focused family, as a lot of South African families are, especially when it comes to rugby. But yeah, Dad always never wanted me to go play rugby because he said I will always get injured. I'll look like him with 38 broken bones. So yeah, so it was athletics for me.
Well, I'm a Kiwi, so we won't be talking about rugby on this show. We'll bypass that and
You'll be great to hear that I'm actually a Kiwi fan. Me and Jake always have heavy disputes over when it comes to the Bledisloe.
I've heard over the years that people that choose hurdling as a sport have got rocks in their head. Would you tend to agree with that?
I would, especially since I have fallen a few times. It is a bit of a, they call it, sprinters who don't make it in the 100 go run hurdles. But yeah, no, I love the hurdles. It's such a rhythm event. I haven't found an event that like even when it comes to the 400 hurdles, yes, I do the 110s, but it's just the rhythm of it. It's actually a beautiful sport. I mean, once it's done, in a very fluid motion, it's actually I reckon it's one of the best track events that there are. I mean, look at Sally. She could have gone and run the hundreds, but she went and ran 100 hurdles. So it's for me, it's always been hurdles or nothing else really.
Had a Olympic medalist on the show recently who was a hurdler, and they weren't able to tell me the height of the hurdles. Can you tell me how high the hurdles actually are?
It depends what age you are, but at open men it's meter six
Meter six.
centimeters.
Okay.
Yeah, so meter 6.89 I think it is. So it's almost 107, but not quite.
That's quite a long way to fall, isn't it, if you trip over them?
It is, and the thing is, not all of them, they're quite heavy as well, so you hit them, you get a nice bruise on your leg as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for sharing your entry into your sport. Jake, what about you? What do you do and how did you get into it?
I'm Jake Doran. I run the 100 meters. Occasionally, I run a 200 meters. So, like Jascha, I am a track and field athlete. I haven't been in the sport for relatively too long. I definitely wasn't doing it when I was 3. In my young career as a sports person, I've thrown my hat in the ring for a lot of different sports and have enjoyed a lot of different sports. And really, through fate and certain circumstances, I've found my way into track sprinting. And realistically, over the last 5 years, I've just kept getting better and better, and that's the reason why I've been able to keep going, and that was the reason why I turned pro and endeavour into a different aspect of life. I really took athletics by the scruff of the neck and trying to get everything out of it. So, Jascha and I work really hard in training, and I've been able to achieve quite a bit in my relatively short career. So, yeah, the 100 meters, run fast, all that jazz.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Now, Joe, you're the one that's got the most experience amongst the group today on the show. So I'd like to know a little bit of advice, I guess, for the young guys that you can kind of look back on now and go, okay, well, when I was their age starting off, this is a couple of great tips that I got from people around me. Have you got anything you can share that you can remember were worthwhile nuggets when you're at their age?
It's definitely interesting now seeing the way sport has evolved from myself being a young person coming into sport to like these guys now. It's a much more professional setup. I think you can actually, as a young person in sport, you can build a professional career, and I think it really does depend as well to a degree in the sports that you're in as to the opportunity. So for me, it was always a challenge because weightlifting wasn't and still isn't really a big profile sport here in the UK. And I think, it's quite similar to Australia, but I think Australia have got slightly better setup in terms of support and funding and just guiding the athletes a little bit more. I think one of the first things I always got told by the older ladies in the squad, I was just a kid. I just wanted to lift. I didn't want to get involved in politics and the nonsense. And I think, it's quite easy because sport has so much more politics. And two of the things I got told is there's always more politics in sport than politics alone. And I think these guys, if you haven't already heard, of the politics in sport, it will start to trickle in. So, just try and focus on yourself and your own progression and just allow yourself. I think one thing I didn't do enough of was actually acknowledge my successes as a youngster because I was so hungry. There wasn't really a junior circuit or a platform for lifting. So I was competing to qualify at senior level. So I was always quite driven and didn't actually, it's only in the last few years I've looked back and I'm like, wow, my first junior worlds, I came 8th in the world. That's pretty good. But at the time, I didn't feel like I performed enough and we were made to feel. So I think you need to really acknowledge your journey and recognize its success. But the one thing I remember being told at one of my first national squads was get yourself an education and have other things up your, other opportunities or plans up your sleeve because sport, whilst it's great and it can provide you opportunities, it could end tomorrow. And so, they were always quite quite firm with me and making sure I did my study time in between training, which, you know, you didn't really want to do. You wanted to just enjoy being in squads. So I think it is a case of, you know, be sensible as well, because sometimes when you do get funding, or you get, like, you guys might get performance money, I think just putting it into savings and not getting carried away with the, wow, I've just made this much amount of money, go and spend it on something completely random or short-lived. I think that would be another factor of just, you know, recognizing that you might need that money, because I see so many athletes, you know, that are on funding, or they're getting a reliable income, and then that suddenly stops from their sport, and they're just kind of at a loss, like, what do I do now? And so yeah, I definitely think, like, always have at least one other interest that can sideline your attention, because it can become very heavy focus when you're young. But I think, yeah, definitely recognize your successes, appreciate and take in every part of that journey that you're on, because I think in sport it's quite easy, and especially at the higher level, it becomes very performance focused rather than, you know, development and building on those successes for the end game. I think we get quite intense quite quick in some sports. So it's just, you know, sometimes sitting back and saying, right, I need to enjoy this a little bit more. And athletes, we tend to forget that, even in training and things like that. We forget we're supposed to enjoy this stuff as we go along the way. And I'm sure, you know, I definitely am not a long distance. I'd say 100 meters for me is long distance. I switch off quite quickly. So, but I can, if I need to, I go out for a run. So I'm running like 5 to 10K once a week at the moment to keep me occupied. But yeah, I have to really focus on it. So, you know, I think it's enjoying that journey and thinking of the other ways as well, that what else can make you a better athlete. And sometimes it's the external stuff outside of the sport, you know, going in the gym and getting stronger, to know that that's going to apply into your sport is another exciting part of the puzzle.
Yeah, great sharing of wisdom there. Thank you for that. And I'm interested to know from the guys how you relate to some of those things that Joe's just shared, guys. What are your views on those things? Jascha, you want to start off?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree there with Joe about the fact that I don't think we stop and think about what we are actually achieving as we go along. You know, it is where, you know, we're 20, 21 years old. We just want to be the best that we can be right now. And I think patience for us is sometimes a little bit not there. And yeah, we're not looking back and going, oh, okay, well, I did just do what I just did. So I think that's a piece of advice that I could really, from me personally, take on as well, and not be so critical maybe about myself as well. But I think, and also the fact of having a different interest as well is a big part of what I've been taught as well. You know, I went and got my degree in IT alongside with doing my sport, because as Joe said, it could all end tomorrow. So it has been a big thought process for me. Yeah. You
ran a PB last weekend. Did you celebrate?
I did. Yeah, we had a big braai, a lot of meat. So it was a typical South African dinner. So that was good fun. But yeah, no, I definitely did. So I you know, you have to remind yourself to stop and think, because I already straight after the race was thinking about my race coming up. So, you know, it's important, as Joe said, just to, you know, stop and think a little bit about what you just achieved.
Yeah. Jake, what are your thoughts around what Joe had to share?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's very much applicable to people of all sports, whether they be amateur or professional, or just starting out or just finishing off. It really doesn't matter. It's hard, and I definitely personally have experienced quite a few successes, and you don't really, you know, stick around to smell the roses. And especially as a sprinter, I don't know, I'm sure it is the same in a lot of other sports. We're never happy with the result we want. You know, I could run a PB on the weekend, and I'd think, oh, I could have gone faster if I'd done this and this and this. So that's obviously, yeah, a big take home, and it's something that a lot of people should really strive to do a little bit better. And definitely the politics in sport. I've been privy to quite a bit of politics in sport already in my sport, in my relatively short career. So that can be very frustrating, and managing that is important. So, understanding techniques and having a good core team around you that you can trust is a big part of that. So, no, I really appreciate Jo giving us her words of wisdom tonight.
Well, as a spectator standing on the sidelines, I was actually making a list the other day of all the things that I can do in my life in under 10 seconds, Jake, and I didn't come up with anything. So when it comes to sprinting, I'm probably not very good at that. But look, I'd like to ask you all too, in relation to what Jo was saying in terms of celebrating milestones and that. Do you think it's kind of impacted also by peer pressure within sports? Like, everybody's looking for your next great event and your next great accomplishment. Do you think there's a lot of that going on that minimises the amount of time we actually spend celebrating these milestones? Would you agree with that? Anybody, you can take it.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I personally, going back to a personal experience I had, I broke an Australian record, and 5 days later I had to compete at a world championship event. And because I'd broken the Australian record, everyone automatically assumed that, I've got to go on to win the gold now. And when, that kind of pressure is piled on, that's when things go wayward, and it didn't come my way. And ever since then, that's been a recurring theme. Spectators, other athletes, shareholders in the sport almost expect certain things from you, but they don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Only Jascha might know fairly well what's going on with me currently, and not many other people would have an idea. So it is hard to manage expectation and really try and, again, stop and smell the roses.
What do the other two think about that?
Yeah, I think it's I think the pressure to perform is always kind of lingering in an athlete's mind, and I think sometimes, especially those that are less experienced in the sport and they're more of a spectator, like a lot of my friends, it's really, they'd ask me how a competition went, and I'd be like, oh, it wasn't good, and they'd be like, oh my God, did you not win? And I was like, oh no, I won, and I broke 2 British records, but I didn't lift what I wanted to lift. So like you were saying, you feel like you can always run a little bit quicker, or you can improve what you want. So, and they found that really hard to understand, but it was me raising that bar. I think when it gets to competitions, people don't always understand. Like, they just think because you're a national champion, you're going to go and win the world championships. If only it was that easy. And I think sometimes when you get athletes of like a really high caliber that make winning or running sub 10 so consistently look so easy, it adds to the pressure of people just think you're a Usain Bolt. Oh, you sprint? Oh, you're a Usain Bolt then? Oh, there's this association, which I think people struggle in, and you're kind of chasing that end goal. And so sometimes I think athletes can often feel like, when you've got someone as quite as high profile, whatever you do in your own personal achievement, it's not anything close to what, a Usain Bolt or a Michael Phelps is doing. And so you're a little bit harder on yourself because you're like, well, I'm not there yet, so it's not good enough. And I think that's definitely one of the pressures. I think the other thing these guys have got to deal with, and I was talking to some of one of our younger athletes last night, is you guys have the pressures now of social media to showcase. And back in my early career, we only just got email at my first Commonwealth Games, so no one really had email. So that was a new thing coming into sport, is the social media platforms, and people's expectation through social media is another big area of pressures that athletes are finding themselves dealing with along the way as well. So yeah, definite challenges there.
Jascha, what's your take on that?
I agree with both Jake and Jo there. That the pressures that other people might put on you as well is definitely a big thing. Like Jo was saying, you go to your friends and they go, oh, the other person ran third. What's 13:32 for an auto qualifier with the Olympics? You're only 0.4 of a second off that. But 0.4 of a second is almost an impossible task to take off in 2 weeks. So there's definitely that expectation that every time you go and run, you are going to PB, or you are going to be the best in the world every single time, because you train this hard for weeks and weeks out. So every time you go run, I guess there's that expectation or compete that you're going to do better than you did last time. So, and I think that's one of the key things that we have to remind ourselves as well. Like, we aren't competing for them. It's our personal best. It's for us basically, and that's where you'll say we have to stop and acknowledge the great experiences we've had and the achievements we've achieved throughout our career, if it's a long career or even if it's a short career. Like, I played high level soccer. I never stopped to think that I was playing, I was a 16-year-old with open men at a state level 1 league soccer. I was almost going to go play Melbourne Victory, but it wasn't. I broke my leg, so I never stopped to think. I was like, I just got to get back out and run. So that's basically, like, I think it's an important thing that we can all take from that.
Do you think the naivety of sports fans plays a role in that as well? Because what I'm hearing here is that people just don't really understand what you guys go through, right? And when you're talking about milliseconds and all those sorts of things, they're huge gains that you either have to do or can't do sometimes, because it's just biologically impossible for your body to do that. So do you think we have a situation where we've got too many couch surfers sitting at home watching sport on TV going, oh, why haven't they performed better than they did last time? There's so much to it, isn't it? It's complex.
That's exactly it. I think there's a lot of people that they watch sport, but they don't really know sport. They don't know what athletes go through day in, day out. You could have one tight muscle in your body for that split second, and that could cause you to underperform in any sport. And I think that's a big thing. As you say, the couch surfers out there that are they're watching you perform, but they don't actually know what it takes to be that good. You know what I mean? And I guess I see that a lot. With training with Jake and Paul, like, their achievements that they've had over the years as well. I see firsthand about how hard they've worked and how they got their achievements. And then people saying, oh, why haven't you run faster? But you haven't run that fast, so you don't know what it takes to actually run that fast. You know what I mean? So there's definitely a big thing there with a lot of people not understanding what it actually takes to be a professional sports person.
Jake, is that a frustrating thing for you, that people just don't have a better understanding of your sport?
Yeah, a lot of people think they know sport, and a lot of people think they would have made it if X, Y, Z. But the fact of the matter is they don't. And there seems to be more and more, both domestically here in Australia, but even you see dribs and drabs of it internationally, a lot of negativity surrounding sport within the the spectator community and the shareholder community. I think it's frustrating, but it really just comes down to ignorance. And a lot of the time it's because it's such a quantitative part of life, sport. It can be really disregarded, and the athletes can be really taken away from their humanism. So they're treated more like a number, or like the spectators owed something by the athlete. But we put in so much work and go through so much, and things happen, things change, and the results are really all we get out of the work we put in. So we're definitely trying out to be the best we can be, but if people can discount that or disregard our hard work as nonsense when we don't perform, then that just comes down to ignorance, and it can be frustrating. But I guess you just have to dust it off with a lot of the other things you have to dust off in sport.
Joe, did you find that when you transitioned from diving to weightlifting, was there the naysayers going, oh, you're not going to make it in weightlifting? Why did you choose to go into that sport?
It was actually the opposite. I think people were more concerned because I was a girl, and I was a young girl. I was a tiny little thing. And so there was more the issue, obviously, like weightlifting has the stigma of it stunts your growth, it's bad for you, you can't do it until you're a certain age, like you can't be. So there was a lot more concern around my well-being. I mean, I'm not the best person, I've always said it, to promote the stunt your growth concept is a myth, because I'm not even 5 foot tall. So, but none of my family are over 5'8", so we're on both sides of my family. We're relatively small, but when I went in and I'd say to people, "It doesn't stunt your growth," they look at me and they're like, "But you're tiny," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it was actually I think people didn't really understand as I said before, weightlifting wasn't a big thing, but there's a lot of association with weightlifting to being a bodybuilder, or the Miss Fitness models and stuff like that, which I really, that's not my thing at all. I'm not like that. I think the thing I enjoyed about weightlifting was it wasn't based on your appearance, whereas diving was, and I was always the short, what I called stacked and compact. So my build for diving wasn't of a diver's build in that generation. If I was a diver now, I'd be perfect in the sense of I've got the legs and so it shows you how sports transition. But there was a lot of nervousness. My grandparents out in Spain my nan thought I was going to break my back or do stuff to my back, and there was all this worry. And I'm not like, it always goes back to education, whether it's spectators, whether it's new people in the sport. It's understanding each and everyone's sport, and that was the great thing about my gym, is my coach worked with top athletes across different sports. So I was exposed to like Steve Backley's, the Donna Frasers. When the Crystal Palace Grand Prix was there, I got to see the Kim Collinses. We had Andy Turner, who was a really good British hurdler, based with us. So I was exposed. But I think when I was really young, I was very naive in the sense of I didn't realise the ripples I was creating in the sport as a 13-year-old girl, because there was one woman, she wouldn't talk to me because I broke her London record. Right. And it wasn't until like a little while later, her then boyfriend, or at that time he was then her ex, but I said, "Oh yeah, she's never really spoken to me," and I found that quite odd. But coming from a sport like diving, where it is a bit, girls get a bit funny with stuff. Yeah. He said, "Yeah, she wasn't happy that you took her London record." I said, "Well, it's not hers to keep. That's what records are there to be broken." Yeah. And so I just went through this journey, and I was really naive. I didn't realise the impact I was having on the sport. There was a lot of fuss, but because I was little as well, all these people kept, "Oh, you're so cute. Oh, look at you." And I was like, I just want to lift. Like, I didn't really understand it. But I think, from the spectators and the education side, similar to sprinting, when people go, "Oh, it's only like 1/100th of a second." It's the same for us. Like if we're cutting body weight and I'm saying, "Oh, I'm struggling, I've got like 200 grams to lose. It took me an hour and a half to lose 200 grams." And they're like, 200 grams, that's nothing. And I'm like, yeah, that's easy when you're not, you've not been really strict with your diet and you're, dehydrated, or, "Oh, is that they beat you by a kilo or 2 kilos? Like, surely it's just 2 kilos. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, it's just 2 kilos. You put it on the bar and do it." Yeah. But something that was always a classic when I was diving, and I never forget it, my mum used to be, they weren't pushy parents. They always just wanted us to try. But if I wasn't doing a certain dive and I was scared of learning or, trying to improve it, she was like, "I don't understand why you just don't do the skill and do this." And I'm like, "Well, if it's that easy, you get on the board and do it." And I remember from that day on, she was like, "I'm just not going to make any comments," because I literally just said, "If it's so easy, show me how to do it."
How to do it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think the one good thing in the UK that has started to allow people to appreciate how hard sports are is some of the, I'm not a huge fan of reality shows, but we've had some reality sports shows where like celebrities and non-sports people have come in, and even sports people have come in and tried other sports and competed at it. And so like Tom Daley did a show called Splash where it had celebrities learning how to dive, and it was really funny because they all thought it would just be really, really easy and just doing basic skills. They were really struggling, they were wiping out. And so it does, I think, having those sort of people come in and try the sport allows the spectators that we're trying to target understand, okay, it's really not that easy. Not everyone can do this. And I think, you know, as an athlete, you just kind of have to switch off to those pressures and just focus on you in that time, rather than, you know, worrying about what everyone's. But it's easy. It's always easier said than done.
Easier said
in
than
the back
done.
of your mind somewhere, you're like, well, I've got to do this for my nation. I've got to do it for my club or my, you know, my family or whatever the expectation is. Sometimes, usually ourselves is like way down the pecking order in terms of who we're wanting to achieve for. So I think, you know, just appreciating what you're there to do and taking it one step at a time is usually my advice to people. Good
one. Jascha and Jake, I think I've got the solution, mates. I'm going to stage a couple of events in Australia where we have a 100-metre sprint at the Sydney Opera House, in the front of the Sydney Opera House, and a 110-metre hurdle race. And we're going to dedicate lane 8 to Joe Blow from the public, who can come and race against our best athletes in Australia and just find out what it's all about. How about we do that? Yeah, that'd be the way to show them.
That sounds like a plan.
I can run backwards if you want to make it a bit fairer. But
you could attach a big price tag to it. If you could attach a big price tag and say, if, you know, Joe Public can run whatever your record is, you know, if you can run that, you'll get $5,000 or whatever it is. My coach did a similar thing at Crystal Palace National Sports Centre. He loaded a bar up in the reception of the sports centre and put the world record weight on it. And it was the theory that people will walk in and just go, oh, they're just rubber weights. Oh, this is going to be really easy. And the amount of people that would come in and try and pick it up. And basically, I think they said if you picked it up, you could get 1 year's free membership at the sports centre. And there was loads of people walking in going, oh, it's just rubber. That's fine. But yeah, no one ever did. So it proves that point, right?
Okay, we've got a plan. We'll go for it. Okay, let's change tack a little bit, because I'm glad that we've got different sports events on the show tonight, because they're all affected by our next topic, which is the wonderful topic of drugs in sport. It's something that's spoken about all the time by us sports fans in terms of, are we seeing clean athletes? Are we ever going to see clean athletes? Was that performance tainted in any way that we've been watching? Can we trust the Olympic Games to be true and fair? So as athletes in your different disciplines, do you ever have a mindset that you're getting up to the start line or lifting your first weights, in your case, Joe, against competitors who are avidly cheating? Do you have that thought process at all? Who wants to start on this one?
I don't mind going first.
Okay, where you go, Joe.
Okay. I mean, weightlifting is, at the moment, we're quite a high-profile federation for retesting, and there's lots of scandal and corruption happening in our world federation at the moment, unfortunately. I think, you know, definitely as a young lifter, when things like WADA didn't exist, it was really hard as an athlete to know that in your home country, your national testing program was really efficient. It was really quite strict in terms of making sure people were tested in and out of competition. I think the challenge was, you know, there was naivety. I just went to competitions and wanted to lift. But the variation between, you know, the absolute top in the world at that time compared to where I was sitting, there was definite, you know, the use of performance enhancing drugs in certain nations, state sponsored programs that we're now being made more aware of. I think you kind of knew it was there, or, you know, I heard other athletes talking about it, and this athlete, blah, blah, blah. And you could visually see as well, especially with the females. And so I think I was aware of it more than I let myself kind of acknowledge in terms of my performance. And I always just took the mindset of, you know, you can only control what you do. You can't control anything else. And so when I used to go to internationals, it was just a case of, I'm just going to focus on me. It doesn't matter, you know, at the end of the day, whether they are or they aren't using performance enhancing drugs, they've still got to run that race, or they've still got to lift the weight and get a weight in or secure a time. And that's one thing that sport doesn't allow. It, you know, or the use of drugs doesn't confirm that you're going to hit every competition and get it right. But I just kind of let them get on with what they were doing. I couldn't waste energy focusing on what they were doing.
Yeah.
I just had to focus on myself.
Yep.
And what I could control, and
yep.
and I you know, I have that approach, and I say that to lifters because they're like, oh, they're Russian or they're this, and I'm like, but they're not. They've still got to get their lifts in. They've still got to perform. It doesn't matter. You need to control what you can control. If you spend more time worrying about X, Y, and Z, then you know you're not focusing on your own performance. So I think, you know, I think our sport's never shied away from the fact that it is an issue. It's being addressed more so now as we've, you know, uncovered there has been backhanders given to the former president, and you know, all sorts of corruption, and you know, tests kept secret and brushed under the carpet, which I know in athletics and track and field has happened previously.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I'm interested to hear from the guys about the track and field world, because you know, we've seen something like weightlifting, and you go back decades, I guess, in terms of weightlifting. There's been issues in that sport, as there has been in track and field. So for young guys coming into it now, how do you guys, what mindset do you have when it comes to this topic, Jake?
I think personally I have a very similar mindset as Joe going into it. You know, I haven't had a long career, but I've already been exposed to I've raced against dudes that have been doping. I've raced against dudes that have been caught doping. And it's just, you know, it's hard because you realistically just go, oh, well, it's a part of the sport. And you hope that the regulatory bodies can really start to clean it up. And I know that my life is quite greatly impacted as a result of WADA. And, you know, they make sure that I'm a clean athlete, and I'm proud to be so. But, you know, that's very strict regimen I have to go through to make sure of that. And I hope that strict regimen is shared with a lot of my peers. And when I do line up on a race, I hope that it's a fair game. And you know, we've all done the same amount of work with the same amount of help. So it's hard, but you know, I don't ever go into a race thinking, oh, this bloke is doping, he's going to be, you know, X percent better than me or whatever. Because in my head, I'm, you know, rocking up expecting to win, because that's you know, the kind of kill or be killed mindset you have to have in sport. But yeah, there's been a really long history of doping in track and field, and as it has been in weightlifting. But you know, specifically in track and field, the sprints have been, you know, probably the most the most publicized about. We've had, you know, major international athletes like Ben Johnson get done. Justin Gatlin has gone and won a world champs while he's on the juice, been banned, and come back and won another world champs. So, you know, it's very contentious. It's very difficult to get around, and it's a massive part of the sport. And it's definitely something that you're brought up into the sport, understanding the pitfalls of and what's involved and who's kind of doing what. But it's scary. But personally, I don't pertain too much of my brain power to it, because I'm too busy either dying on the track from the hard work I'm naturally putting in, or getting ready to race and beat those guys anyway. So that's the kind of mentality I take into it.
Now, just for the sake of people listening and watching the show today, we've heard the acronym used, WADA. It stands for World Anti-Doping Association. It's the body that's been set up to try and mitigate doping in sport. There's lots of different programs across different sports that trying to help the clean athletes out by setting a fair playing field. Jake, could you explain to us, for the sake of people that are not familiar with this process, what are some of the WADA elements that affect you in your life in terms of things that you need to do to make sure you're a clean athlete in their eyes?
It's a pretty confronting process. You know, obviously, you know, most people should be privy that elite athletes are drug tested. And drug testing can take many forms. You know, the most notable of those would be a urine sample or a blood sample. And to be on, you know, on WADA's radar, you have to be a decent athlete. And when you are on WADA's radar, they have the ability to test you whenever and wherever. And personally, you know, I've had doping agents rock up at my house at 6 o'clock in the morning and wake me up. I've had them rock up at 10:30 at night when I'm in my PJs tucked up in bed, and I've had to get up and go drink a whole bunch because I have to give a urine sample. And it's quite confronting. They're very much to avoid any incorrect samples or cheating during the testing process. They have to physically watch you give every different type of sample, which can be very confronting for both young athletes and basically anyone. I think it's probably the only career in the world where that's enforced, and that it is backed by a lot of legality. And personally now I'm on a whereabouts program, so I have to lodge to my governing body. So it's currently Sport Integrity Australia, which operates under WADA. I have to lodge where I am in the world, where I'm sleeping that night every day. So they can randomly test me, and they know exactly where I'm going to be at that confronting. It's a bit, in some aspects, an invasion of privacy, but it is that kind of necessary evil we have to incorporate in our sports, unfortunately, because there are people that do bend the rules and cheat and make it difficult for the rest of us to go about our natural competitive ways. So yeah, it is a bit of a intrusion, but it's part of the sport. It's part of the job you sign up on.
Jascha, what's your view on the whole drugs in sport, in particular in your sport? Has there been a lot of hurdlers that have been kicked out of testing positive?
Personally, I haven't had a huge amount to do with drugs, like to a face-to-face level. I haven't raced against anyone that I know of that was doping at the time. But as a hurdler as well, as a big fan of athletics and sport, I don't think there has been as many hurdlers as there has been in the 100-meter sprint or the 200s or 400s as per much. It's a lot more technical event than it is a straight, brute force sort of muscly event, and max speed. So yeah, so for the hurdles especially, I don't think there's been as much, but it's definitely there. I don't say there isn't at all, but yeah, no, but especially training with Jake and having trained with other people and being in races with people who've qualified for huge events. When I was just coming back from it, that's like Jake said, they are around, they test everybody to make it fair. It's been a big part of the sport, which I think is negative, especially being a huge fan of athletics. Is one of the biggest. I love watching athletics. It's sad to see, a world championships such as last year where people are walking out on the 100 meters because of doping. You know what I mean? So it's a sad feat, but I think it's something that, as Joe said, is being cleaned up a little bit better with with WADA and with more countries' doping organisations coming together and agreeing on a standard that is worldwide.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for all sharing that. Now, I've got a couple of subjects that I want to get to before we end the show today. So if I can ask you to give maybe a little bit shorter answers on these, because I want to get everybody's opinion on them, because I think they're pretty hot topics for our audience. The first one is the games that were on last year that are on this year that we don't know if are going to be on at all, right? So the Tokyo Olympics, and I'm not trying to make fun of it, because there's a lot of people that are in desperate situations trying to get to Tokyo, and a lot of people trying to have their first experience at the Olympic Games, and others that are trying to end their career at the Olympic Games that may be on, maybe not on. So give us a athlete's perspective on what it's like in this very unique situation we're in, where we're talking about a delayed and postponed Olympic Games, and also all the other things that are going with it, with the restrictions and all the protocols that have been put into place. Who would like to kick this one off? Don't be shy, folks. Don't be shy.
Ladies first again.
Ladies first. Joe,
Okay,
where you
I
going?
don't mind. I just don't ever want to be that first person. Yeah, it's a really tough one, and I'm feeling for the athletes that are either my friends literally are still got to finish qualifying, which is one of the factors for some sports. They still haven't done their final races or competitions to earn the qualification, which is a tough one. So it's like, where do you draw the line on, do you just stop it from last year and say, right, wherever the results are now, let's just allow the athletes to focus on the games ahead and not worry about qualifying. It is where it is, and take into consideration some of the outside, factors for some individuals. I think, my gut always, I think Tokyo will do an amazing job. And I do feel for the organising committee, because I think it would have been probably the best games of probably, in a long time. But at the same time, from a safety point of view and an Olympic environment, I'm not sure it will. If it goes ahead, it's going to deliver the way that an Olympic Games should deliver and provide that experience. So, my heart says, please let it happen, because, that's what the athletes deserve and they've worked meticulously hard for the last 4 years of their lives. But my gut has this slight denial that I'm not sure it's going to happen at all, and maybe they should just leave it and find another way to utilise and just go on to Paris. But it affects new athletes and experienced athletes in two ways. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, really.
Yeah. Okay. Good points, Jake. What's your view on this?
I've been pretty, open and honest, personally, and in the media. I think, the games will go ahead in some capacity. I think there's way too much at stake, and way too much investment and infrastructure set up already for it not to. I think it would really cripple Japan, and it would really cripple the IOC in general. They've been struggling in the last, couple iterations of the games as it is. So, I don't think COVID will be the final blow. And, us as human beings, we don't let things like this really get us down. And I really, hope the Olympics can be a celebration of what makes us great. And it is just going to be a sporting spectacle that brings the world together. So in that regard, I'm hopeful. And obviously, more selfishly, more personally, I'm hopeful that it goes ahead so that I can compete my first Olympics. And, that'd be amazing personally. And I've worked ridiculously hard over the last few years to get there, and it seems so close. So for it to fall apart now would be very unfortunate. And like Joe said, I think Japan have the capability and the capacity to do it. Obviously not in the regard they wish they could have in normal times, but as a nation, I really believe they can put on a safe games and protect both their assets, their people, and the athletes as well. And I think that infrastructure is going to be, top class to do so. So, I think if it goes ahead in some capacity, I'm very skeptical that there'll be crowds or whatnot. And I doubt if I do go, I'll be in the country for too long. But, for that kind of tick off, for that kind of spectacle of sporting prowess, I think it has to go ahead, and it'll really be a shame if it doesn't. But I think 2021 could be a really uplifting year after what was a bit of a shame last year if the games can go ahead. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I hope everybody that is watching the show is keeping their fingers crossed for us athletes. And, personally, I put my body at risk time and time again to do this sport. So, personally, I would sign off anything to risk getting the virus over there to compete. So it is what it is. We put our lives on the line for this. We want it more than anything in the world. So, let's hopefully get the games off the ground and go compete in the best of our abilities.
Okay, thanks for that, Jake. What about you, Jascha? What are your thoughts around Tokyo 2021?
I personally think that it will go ahead, and it's being said in the media that, as Jake said, it would be too much of a loss if it doesn't go ahead, and I think it can be a really great thing as well. It can really be a once in a lifetime Olympic Games. It'll be the most memorable Olympic Games. There wasn't spectators. Everybody was watching online. The world was in view of the Olympic Games. It'll be the first major international event. You can see what a success the tennis is at the moment with everybody watching the Australian Open. I do think the Olympic Games will just take that to the next level. And personally, I also really hope it goes ahead. It'll be something that's fantastic. That'll be to watch, and all the hard work and dedication that a lot of us athletes have put in, just to not have the opportunity to not even try to go, will be not worth our while, I guess. But as Jake said, I think any athlete will give anything to go to Olympic Games if they had the opportunity. So.
Oh, well, here's fingers crossed, and let's hope that the right thing does actually happen here, right, for everybody concerned. Our last topic today on the show is going to be something else that's quite topical around the world of sport at the moment. We have a new president in the United States of America, and as he was doing his 10-second dash and writing out executive orders, one of the things that he did was to make sure that transgenders in sport was a thing that was going to be in law. And we've seen a lot of online discussions and dialogue going on, particularly from women in sport across the world, saying that this is the end of women's sport. And there's quite a lot of discussion going on. It's a very complex issue, and I only want you to speak to it as much as you want to today on the show, but I'm really interested to hear both from a male and female perspective. And I'm assuming we don't have any transgenders on the show today, so I've got to make sure that I do the diplomatic thing there. But I really like to hear what your thoughts are on this, because you're part of the global sporting community, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. So, Joe, I'm going to throw the last question of the day over to you to kick off with.
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge. Definitely women in sport are currently facing, and I think there's been a New Zealand lifter that has, a few years ago switched, Laurel Hubbard, to become female. It was definitely a very high profile situation in the Gold Coast Games back in 2018. It's been an interesting discussion. I think my personal opinion is, we want to welcome as many people and accept people in sport. I think the issue, my own issue is, I don't think there's been enough scientific research to support. And whilst Laurel has followed the rules, followed the legislation, she hasn't technically broken any rules within the sport, which is one of the toughest challenges. For me, the issue is in terms of the science is, it's quite a different situation when a 10-year-old prepubescent boy identifies or decides to start to identify themselves as a female, because testosterone and all the the pre-puberty and that side of the science and stages of development have not kicked in. So again, you can make those changes. That's going to impact, compared to a 30-something-year-old or someone that is post-pubescent and had their teenage years and their puberty and all the testosterone. I think that's a really hard line, especially in a strength sport or sports where speed, power and strength are fundamental, like each of our sports, where it kind of sits. So, we don't want to rule people out, but I think it's just it's been quite controversial. And again, I've said to people, the transgender athletes, and they're only following the rules and the legislation that's been put in place. And I've always said, from an IWF perspective, it came at a time when we had so much negativity around our sport because of doping, that I think they were like, this is an opportunity to look like we're really moving forward with the sport, and kind of put it in, and it became a bit of a profile, but it caused more negativity in some ways. And I always said, people said, what's my view at the start? And I said, I'm glad she's not in my weight class. But she is in my friend's weight class. And, my friend just said, I'm going to train just as hard and I will beat her and I will catch her. And she's now pretty much doing, she's worked her socks off. But it has cost. You can't help but feel that some of these transgender athletes coming in, I know the female super heavyweight in New Zealand at the time had to either lose 25 kilos, which was physically impossible, or retire. So she made the option to retire because she just felt there was no way she was ever going to compete. So I do feel like more research and more science needs clearer guidelines as to whether that, at what age point or what point of physical development has taken place in a male that wants to become female, in order to make the decisions, because 2 years of just going away, and it won't really make that much difference in terms of their strength base, because they've had a lifetime of testosterone already sustained. So for me, as sport, we want to accommodate the sole purpose of sport is to allow everyone and anyone to do sport free from discrimination. But at the same time, right now, it does feel that women are in some cases being discriminated to allow the market. And there's always part of me in the back of my mind going, well, is this someone that's just doing this to get into a national team or to get onto an international level? And then once they've achieved what they want, they're going to revert back. There's always that kind of thing that sits in your mind. But, you know, I think it's a really tough position in sport at the moment. But I do feel for female athletes because it's a really, really hard challenge. Like, how can you compete with a guy that's now a female who's had that advantage naturally in his sense as a guy to now come over and be female? So yeah, it's a real tough challenge, I think.
Let's get the guys' perspective on it, because one of the things that's been very prevalent in the global dialogues that have been going on about this is about guys transitioning into women, but we haven't heard a lot about women transitioning into guys and competing against the guys, right? That's an interesting part of the whole conversation as well. But I throw over to you guys. What are your views about this and how it's affecting particularly women's sports, because it's a big issue?
Yeah, I think it's very contentious, obviously, and again, it is very, it's an issue globally. It's a massive social issue, it seems, and not more a social issue than a sporting issue. And I think, you know, like Joe said, we want to be inclusive and have everyone involved in sport in any capacity, and that's why we really push for, you know, para sports and stuff like that, so that everybody can feel involved. But when it comes to professionalism in sport and actually becoming, you know, making sport your job, I think it's difficult to really, you know, find any supporting arguments for having, you know, men chemically changing into women. Part of that sport, we just spoke about the prevalence of doping in sport. So we know for a fact that there's athletes that'll, you know, pump their body full of toxins to get an edge on their competition. So there'll definitely be athletes in the future that'll abuse this and make that swap to you know, become more competitive and beat the women. And like I said, that really hinders female sport, and you know, that's an issue. And that on a competitive level in weightlifting and in track, that's definitely going to be on show. We've had lots of, you know, shining examples of that, like the lady at the Commonwealth Games. We've had Caster Semenya, who necessarily hasn't is a massive outlier because she's naturally like that, and that's another different contentious issue. But I think it really becomes an issue when we move into combat sports and contact sports, when, you know, there was a massive news story here in Australia where a dude that was over 100 kilos and over 6 foot tall wanted to play in the AFLW when she wanted to transition gender. And realistically, how is it safe to have an athletic man transition into a woman, still be over 100 kilos and be able to hurt the women that they're playing with, and obviously have a significant advantage? So when it comes to the professionalism side of sport, I don't really see any supporting arguments apart from the fact of just being inclusive for the sake of being inclusive. I don't realistically understand how that's safe, and when we have so many guidelines and you know, pitfalls in sport and then hurdles in sport for us, you know, when it's just a normal career path, how this can be accepted just because it's you know, not allowed in the rules. I mean, if you're going to start allowing anybody to do anything, then it's really losing the integrity of a lot of sports. So, you know, I hope it's not just a social justice thing, and it's for the sake, because like you said, you know, you don't see many women transitioning to go pro in men's sport because, you know, they don't have those similar hormones to make them better at the sport. But hopefully they can find a middle ground where everyone can be included, but maybe at the top level it's just not on, so that it maintains that natural integrity of the sport that we've seen for the last, you know, recent history in the sport. Yeah.
Thanks, Jake. Jascha, what are your thoughts around this one?
I think Jake hit the head on the nail there, like, you know, nail on the head, sorry. And he just, like, you know, you don't see often, you know, females transitioning to that male sport, even though I don't see an issue with a female, who's become a male, transition into a male sport. As in a lot of sports, you see even on the start list, everything, it's an open event. So really and realistically, it is acceptable. But I think it is that argument where a male transitions to a female is a little bit of a harder argument to have, as seen with Caster Semenya in the 800. She was naturally born that way, and she hasn't been allowed to go on with the sport. But you're looking at, for example, in the 100 meters. Bolt ran 9.58 seconds. The female's 100-meter record is 10.6 something second, or 5 seconds. You're looking at a second difference.
10.49.
10.49. Yeah.
Yes.
Flow Joe.
Joe.
All those years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a second difference just in one sport. Which is easily. Bolt traveled at 12.8 seconds meters per second. So that's 12 meters in 100 meters, which is quite far. That the best ever was of the in the female athletes. So I think it's a very hard topic to have a debate about, because it is naturally very hard for a female to compete with their male counterparts. So I do believe that we have to find an inclusive ground, but there's a long way to go in sport before I think it's going to be accepted throughout the world.
Yeah, agree. Thank you all for sharing that. I've got a couple of quick fire questions before we go today, and the first one is, what's your favourite bit of sports kit?
For me, I'm going to say like training tights or leggings. I don't know what you guys might call them, so I'll go with both.
Training tights, okay.
Good bit of lycra, yeah.
Okay. Jake, what's your favourite piece of sports kit?
I only need spikes to run fast, so that's my only bit of sport kit that I need. So you'll see me choosing spikes.
Okay. Jascha, what's yours, mate?
For me, I probably just I like wearing shorts and a singlet. That's my way. I feel comfortable. So
okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And the last question of the day is, who's your favourite sports star? Have you got an idol? Have you got somebody that you were either inspired by when you were younger, or someone even today that you look up to in the world of sport? And it doesn't have to be in the sport that you do, and it could be another sport. Joe, have you got one?
Do you know what? I get asked this, and I don't really have. I mean, I grew up around at Crystal Palace watching the likes of Daley Thompson, which was always incredible because he was such a legend and still is a legend. But I think there's been so many, and you relate to them for different reasons, maybe as part of their journey. I think Kelly Holmes, or Dame Kelly Holmes now, just because of her journey of life of injuries and struggles and overcoming that. I think Kathy Freeman, for what she achieved in Australian sport, is monumental in my journey of just seeing them perform and overcome some of the barriers, and it's what sport embodies is overcoming that stuff. But I think one of my favourite ever lifters that I watched and I've always admired lifting wise is Galabin Boevsky. It's the stuff that come after that's probably not the best practice, but in terms of lifting, he was exceptional, and it was always great to be around seeing guys like that. So yeah, no one key person, but I think there's just some incredible people out there now, and yeah, they just inspire you for many different reasons along the way.
Joe, we had one in New Zealand when I was a young boy. His name was Precious McKenzie. You'd probably remember that name.
I've met and trained with Precious when he came to London. I was so excited. I was like, this is incredible. Extraordinary
human being. He was. Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Jascha, who's your have you got a sports idol?
I definitely have a sports idol. I reckon Michael Phelps is one of the most impressive athletes of all time. To have that many Olympic medals and be so successful over so many years is incredible for me. So like, you know, not taking away from any other people's like achievements, but you know, it's to come back time after time to just, you know, do what he does in the swimming pool over so many events is just incredible. And
Yep.
yeah, he's probably one of the my like that not inspires me, but I've got the most respect for in sport.
Yep.
And then obviously Usain Bolt. He's a legend in track and field, and to do what he does, you know, us just going out there and training every day just to try and do half of what he did is really, really hard. So
yeah, cool. Jake, who's your idol? And are you going to say Paul DiBella or what?
I love Paul DiBella. I'm not going to say that though, because his head might get too big. Personally, I'm a fan of way too many sports to ever pick one. You know, it's really difficult. I seem to change a lot. I really like the Cristiano Ronaldos of the world. I really like the Conor McGregors of the world. Obviously, being a track and field athlete, Usain Bolt is always up there. But you know, his counterparts and Johan Blake, etc. I think they're incredible. And your Michael Jordans. I loved his documentary that came out on Netflix last year. That was really, really cool to watch. But, you know, I take a lot of inspiration from my peers as well. I've been able to meet quite a few amazing people in sport, whether they be still competing or retired. So if they're not necessarily the greatest name in sport, they've still inspired me on some way, shape or form. So I really take inspiration from a lot of different sources. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's our last dance, I'll say, for this show. So thank you very much for doing that, Jake. It's been a pleasure having you all on the show today. Thank you very much for participating, for sharing your thoughts, and also about sharing your journey. But on behalf of all the audience around the world today, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for being athletes, and thank you for putting yourselves out there to entertain us, to inspire us, to motivate us, and to do a lot of things that sports always brings the sports fans in us around the world. So I'd like to thank you for that and for participating in the show today.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mark.
And we'll see you all again soon.
Best of luck with your journey, guys.
Lovely to meet you too.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Terrific.
Hopefully you'll get to. I'm working on Birmingham 2022, so hopefully you guys will be there and we'll get you in to watch some weightlifting.
For sure.
I'm still sprinting. I'll be there.
Yeah, and I'll come and watch you guys win. Or,
Thank you very much.
There we are. That's the latest episode from Athletes Confessions here on the Global Sports Channel. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jo, Jascha and Jake. I didn't plan that. 3 J's in the show. And some great conversation there about not only their own personal journey in the world of sport, but also some of the hot topics that are currently out there in the public domain on world sport. Thank you very much for checking us out here at the Global Sports Channel. Don't forget to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback about the show, and if there is anything in particular that you'd like to comment on, let us know. And if you'd like to hear a particular topic on our next show, drop us a note and we'll be happy to accommodate that as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell button. You'll be notified every time we drop a video. And don't forget to check out our wonderful Tasha Danvers interviewing lots of sports people all across the world, all there on our website at globalsportschannel.com and also on our YouTube channel. My name's Mark Philpott. Until next time, I wish you all a very happy and safe week ahead.